All right, hello and welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about posterior pelvic tilt. Now, I am no expert at this. I'm not a doctor, I am not a physiotherapist, but I am a yoga teacher, and upon dissecting some poses with myself and learning how to teach them, I found out that I look a little funny. Now, yoga's not about how you look, I know that, but sometimes there are things that you can do that can essentially lead to problems in the future. Now, I'm just going to give you kind of a quick rundown of what postures look like with posterior pelvic tilt, and then how they are safely done. I mean, I've been doing yoga for 15 years and I've never had a problem. I'm not super old, so, you know, give it time, I guess. But point is, I'm lucky that I figured this out now, because now I can teach it to other people and hopefully help some people. So, like I said, not an expert, but I do have a yogic background, so I can kind of teach you some of the things about how you can do yoga postures a bit differently to help correct the posterior pelvic tilt. There aren't a ton of resources online. A lot of people have anterior tilt, which I'll show you. It seems to be more common, but there are some good ones. I will link the one, super awesome one that I found below. There's actually a couple, I think, but I'll try and find them. I'll link them below, and then they're from physical therapists or physiotherapists, whatever you want to call them, but they're knowledgeable and professionals. So anyhow, let's get started. So, what is posterior pelvic tilt? Posterior pelvic tilt is, let me stand up to show you this, is when instead of standing with a nice lower lumbar curve, we sort of tuck our tailbone all of the time. So even more dramatic expressions of this sometimes have their shoulders down. So my butt kind of goes away, and my shoulders are rounded. This is not a very comfortable place to stay, you know, so we try and correct that. So a natural state, natural pelvic tilt would be, you know, a nice gentle curve in the lumbar, in the lumbar spine. And so in yoga, we teach things to feel like the whole pelvic bone is filled with water or wine or whatever you want, to make sure that we're not spilling it forwards and we're not spilling it backwards. So essentially, if you've ever heard that cue in yoga, I'm spilling my water or my wine all the time. So I need to kind of come to here, right? And that's fine. The anterior one, like I was telling you, is, I mean, I'm exaggerating obviously, but is when your pelvic bone tilts forward naturally. So mine tilts backwards naturally. So I am on a mission to correct it. But on that mission, that's where kind of, this is how we meet, is that I'm learning everything again. So where I thought that, you know, let's use pyramid, where I thought I could get into this really far, you can see the rounding of my back. So that's no good. So here, you know, my posture is here now, and that kind of sucks, but it is what it is. You know, I can't change that. I'd rather be safe than be sorry. But truth be told, it's not the end of the world. I just have to kind of change the way I do things. Now, easier said than done, I know, but that's why I'm here to show you a few things about how you can kind of help yourself. So one thing to keep in mind is when you are in any sort of forward folding, you always hear the hinge at your hips, right? We always hear that, hinge at your hips. Okay, so that's different now, because for whatever reason, I feel like I'm hinging at the hips here, but you can see my whole lower back is super rounded. So that's my pelvic tilt shining its light. Now, if we reassess this forward fold, you poke your butt out and you try and hinge at the hips, but in a different fashion, then this is as far as we go. And we work with it. And it's not super far. It's not super deep. But, you know, this is a testament to how yoga is not about how you look in postures, it's how you feel. So we sit up maybe on a block and we hang out here, and we can feel the pelvic bone tilting up. We want to keep a slight engagement in the hamstrings to keep them safe, but we're more so stretching the hamstrings. So essentially I have weak quads, weak hip flexors. I have a really stretched out lower back, and then I kind of have a weak butt and tight hamstrings. That's the idea. I mean, I've been practicing yoga a lot over the last 15 years, so I know this is maybe a little silly, but I never knew. And I did ask someone at my last teacher training, I showed them my downward dog. I'll show you that now. So I said, hey, in my down dog, my back rounds. Why is that? And they said, that's okay, it's fine. To probably no fault of their own. I've never really heard about this before now. And I've been involved in, I go to yoga studios, I do online stuff, I've done teacher training. So it's a weird thing that we kind of, but sort of slip through the cracks. So hopefully my kind of journey will bring some awareness to that. Just to keep people safer. I mean, it is possible that I would go my entire life and be totally fine. Who knows, right? I don't know the future. But I'm not gonna try. So one thing, before I get into my new downward dog, one thing that's really helpful is cat and cow. So you can feel the pelvic bone moving here. You don't need to go into the full expression, but you can control the pelvic bone. And you can really just practice here and practice feeling into it. So I don't know how this looks. I just know how it feels. I know that my back is rounded and now it's not. So we play with that, we practice, and then eventually we can come up to our quote unquote downward dog. So for me, you saw my old downward dog. This is the new me. So I keep it nice. I kind of exaggerate, and then I draw my butt up to the sky, and then I feel into it. Usually I will do this with a mirror to see when my back starts rounding, because once my back starts rounding, it's really hard to get back there unless I come completely out of it and then start again. So it's probably somewhere around here. Now you can see my legs aren't straight, my arms aren't really straight. It's a weird looking dog, but that's my downward dog, and that's okay. We learn and we grow, and it's not the end of the world. It's also really hard doing these things. I don't have a lot of control of that, so trying to control something that you've never particularly had control of is tricky, and I lose my breath sometimes. Anyhow, not super important that I lose my breath. Maybe it is, I don't know. So one of your best friends now is a rolled up blanket. If you have a bolster, that could work. It might be a little high, you can play with blocks. Pretty much just something to lift your butt up. So you roll it up and then you sit on it, and then you can watch the back go from posterior to neutral, or as close to neutral as we think. And then all of a sudden, it's comfy to sit. It feels like my sit bones are never touching the floor, but that's probably because they aren't, because I've never really learned how to do that. They've always been back. Sad panda? Happier panda? Anyway, so this Dandasana is a huge, huge ask. So I like to grab my strap, and I like to play with it here. So whereas I thought I could, almost bend in half, now I'm essentially a 90 degree human. So I like to bend into my knees and sit up nice and tall. So I'm really drawing that belly towards my thighs. And then I stretch out the knees and I pull forward a little bit. So this is a lot. This is a lot on the quads. I can feel my lower back really working. And I am still a work in progress. So this is not perfect by any means. Don't try to do what I do necessarily. I mean, use it as a guide. Anyway, so that's my Dandasana. Use it as a guide, but also, if you can afford it, go see a physiotherapist. If you can't, that's totally understandable given the given let me just sit on my buddy here. If you can't, that's totally understandable given the state of the world right now. But do try and look online and find your safe version of stuff. So essentially the takeaway from this is that you just want to really keep an eye on that lower back. We want to make sure we're not rounding in, whoop, we're sitting up nice and tall. And it is kind of annoying to think about your lower back at all times, because then you realize, oh my goodness, I sit on this couch weird, I do this weird, I do that weird. But that's okay. You know, being in tune with it is the first step. And then we work towards it. And so my goal for all of you who, I'm just going to turn around a little bit more here. So my goal is that I'm going to do some yoga flows that are very much posterior pelvic tilt related. So there won't be any big forward folds. There won't be any, you know, any large postures like that, pretty much any big forward folds. We'll be taking it easy. We'll be really working on drawing that belly towards the thighs in a safe way. So stay tuned for those, and I hope this was a little bit helpful. I hope this clarified a little bit. And yeah, happy yoga.